My name is Troy Bickham. I'm a professor of history and director of the Glasscock Center for Humanities Research at Texas A&M. Although the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, 4th of July didn't become a national holiday until after the American Civil War in 1870. And that's where we start to see celebrations of 4th of July, including the 4th of July foods we so often see today. The 4th of July didn't become a national holiday until 1870, when the United States was reeling still from the aftershocks of the Civil War. After the Civil War, two national holidays were created, with the idea of creating more national unity. The first was Christmas, and the other was the 4th of July. Thanksgiving had been created 7 years earlier as a national holiday. One of the favorite holiday foods for the 4th of July is, of course, hot dogs. In fact, Americans eat an estimated 150 million hot dogs every 4th of July. To put that in context, if you line them all up, you could go from New York to Honolulu and back, not once, but twice. So the history of the hot dog is a little obscure. Sausages were and are pretty ubiquitous in Europe and the rest of the world, but in the 1870s, the kinds of sausages that people were eating were mostly German. Frankfurters, named after the city of Frankfurt, and Wieners, and that's because most of the immigration at that time was coming in from Germany. Now, a particularly popular type of German sausage was often called the Dachshund, after this actual dog type of sausage. The Chicago World's Fair in 1893 brought about the popularity of what we might call the modern hot dog. Popular with street vendors at the World Fair, and afterwards, the type of sausage was called the Dachshund sausage, named after the dog. So it isn't a big jump to kind of shorten that into a simple hot dog. They became popular with street vendors not just in Chicago, but also New York and other cities, and on college campuses. Not surprisingly, they took a big step with the increasing number of national baseball parks. So by the time that Fenway Park or Wrigley Field opened in the early 20th century, hot dogs were pretty much staple fare for the fans that attended the games. Various hot dog companies have very long histories. Oscar Mayer and his brother founded their meat product business in 19th century Chicago, and in the early 20th century started marketing hot dogs. The iconic Wienermobile launched in 1936. Hebrew National, famous for making kosher hot dogs, started in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1905. And Nathan's famous hot dogs, the official hot dog of Major League Baseball, started as a hot dog stand in Coney Island by a Polish immigrant, Nathan Handwerker, in 1916, based on a $300 loan that he got from his friends. So no 4th of July celebration would be complete without a watermelon. Watermelons come from southern Africa originally, where they're domesticated several thousand years ago. And they spread throughout Africa and into Europe and Asia. So by the time that Christopher Columbus set sail, you could find them in most of the old world. Early Spanish explorers and European colonists brought watermelon seeds with them and planted them throughout the Americas. They're popular because they're great during dry seasons because they contain so much water. Seedless watermelons, which is what accounts for the vast majority of watermelon that we eat in the United States today, weren't invented until the 1930s by Japanese scientists. Interestingly, Americans eat about 15 pounds of watermelon a year, and that's about the size of one really big watermelon, almost entirely in the summer months. However, they're not number one in terms of production of watermelon or consumption of watermelon. That trophy goes to the Chinese, when the Chinese account for about 60% of the world's production of watermelons, and they eat on average over 100 pounds of watermelon a year. There are few things more American than apple pie. Apples were ubiquitous in Europe and would have been some of the first fruit trees from Europe planted in the Americas during the time of colonization. Apples were so popular and so ubiquitous in the American colonies, but by the time the first American cookbook was written by Amelia Simmons in 1796, she includes a specific American apple pie recipe. Apples were popular because they were relatively easy to grow, making them cheap, and they stored really well, making them transportable and being kept for winter. Probably the most recent genre of dessert that's showing up on the 4th of July table is the red, white, and blue dessert. Often it's red comes from strawberries and raspberries, blue from blueberries, and white from something that would be a mixture of cream or Cool Whip or cream cheese. This doesn't come about, however, until the 1950s, when most households started to be able to purchase a refrigerator, which made cold and refrigerated desserts possible. So my family recipe, one that my mother put on the table for every 4th of July, consisted of Jell-O, which had blueberries in it, another layer, which was a mixture of Cool Whip, which had been invented in 1966, and cream cheese for the white, and then red, which had strawberries or raspberries on top. Now, there's a lot of different ways to eat potatoes, but it's the German way is what became the basis of the ubiquitous potato salad in America that we can find on 4th of July holidays today. And that's because German immigration was at its peak in the 1870s, and they were bringing their food with them. It was very popular with summer picnics, also gatherings of any sort of type, largely because it's cheap and you can modify it in any sort of way you wanted to. More mayonnaise or more of a vinaigrette-style dressing with boiled eggs or not boiled eggs, sweet or sour pickles, or really kind of any imaginable way you want to. Macaroni is just another variant, really, of potato salad. With the advent of Italian mass immigration in the early 20th century, pasta became more popular, so essentially they got a lot of macaroni and substituted it for the potatoes. Coleslaw is from Holland, so it comes from the Dutch coleslaw, and it became very popular during colonial times in areas that the Dutch settled around New York. In reality, however, the basis of a cabbage cold salad can be found in cultures throughout the world, including ancient Rome. One of the things that all of these foods have in common is that they are relatively cheap, which means that they can be adapted by almost any ethnicity and culture, so they can be changed to make it so that any palate can enjoy them, and they're relatively easy to store.